Gentleman from 3.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I rise to debate against this bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
It would appear that District 3 is about to be disenfranchised. In 2005, the federal government passed the Real ID Act. Excuse me. It was a significant attempt to usurp both individual freedom and liberty and state sovereignty. In 2008, the Idaho legislature unanimously passed in both houses, and the gentleman on the second floor signed House Bill 606, which can be found in Idaho Code Chapter 3, Title 40, Section 40-322, in which Idaho boldly declared, along with numerous other states, that they would not comply with these unconstitutional mandates. On that day, I was extremely proud of my state government. House Bill 606 was a great bill, and here are a couple of high points. These potential breaches in privacy that could result directly from compliance with the Real ID Act may violate the right of privacy of thousands of residents of Idaho. Obviously, one of the objections to the Real ID was the invasion of privacy it created. One of the main functions of the healthcare exchange will be to gather information on American citizens. Data gathered by the healthcare exchange will be centralized in a federal data services hub, which you've already heard about a little bit today. In that hub, a number of federal agencies such as the Internal Revenue Service, the Social Security Administration, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, and Health and Human Services will be able to access and share information on every American citizen. Back in 2003, before his election, our current president publicly stated that his goal was a single-payer healthcare system, but we would have to get there incrementally. I would submit that when we end up with a single-payer system of healthcare, the health insurance ID card that will be issued by that organization will amount to the Real ID on steroids. As technology increases, things like genetic predisposition to diseases and who knows what else we're capable of will be a part of the public record. Privacy, as we've known it in this country, will cease to exist. The Real ID Act goes on. The mandate to the states through federal legislation that provides no funding for its requirements to issue what is, in effect, a national identification card appears to be an attempt to commandeer the political machinery of the states and to require them to be agents of the federal government in violation with the principles of federalism contained in the 10th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, and they give some Supreme Court decisions. Apparently, the Idaho legislature of 2008 absolutely believed in the principles of federalism and the 10th Amendment when they unanimously agreed that if we complied with these mandates, we would be allowing the federal government to commandeer the machinery that only a state can provide through its constitutional definition of powers to become agents and assist them in taking away more of our freedoms. In my mind, that is exactly what we're looking at here today. 2 years later, in 2010, our legislature was busy again. They passed the Idaho Health Freedom Act. This is from that act. The statement of public policy, if you will. The power to require a person to regulate a person's choice in the mode of securing health care services or to impose a penalty related thereto is not found in the Constitution of the United States of America and is therefore a power reserved to the people pursuant to the 9th Amendment and to the several states pursuant to the 10th Amendment. The state of Idaho hereby exercises its sovereign powers to declare the public policy of the state of Idaho regarding the right of all persons residing in the state of Idaho in choosing the mode of securing their health care services. It goes on. It is hereby declared that the public policy of the state of Idaho, consistent with our constitutionally recognized and inalienable rights of liberty, is that every person within the state of Idaho is and shall be free to choose or decline to choose any mode of securing health care services without penalty or threat of penalty. Apparently, okay, let's see. Once again, I was extremely proud of my state legislature. At this time, Mr. Speaker, if I may read from a quote from the gentleman on the second floor.
From what is the
gentleman on the second floor? It was his remarks to the Health Care Act of 2010.
Without objection, the gentleman may read.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good body. This was his remarks. Congress and the White House are working out their scheme for pushing through a health care reform bill that has more pages than the U.S. Constitution has words. I guarantee you that not a single member of the House or Senate has a complete understanding of that legislation any more than they understand all the implications of the U.S. Patriot Act back in 2001. What the Idaho Health Freedom Act says is that the citizens of our state won't be subject to another federal mandate or turn over another part of their lives to government control. The 10th Amendment of the Constitution codifies in law that the federal government is one of limited and delegated powers, and that all powers not enumerated in the Constitution are reserved to the states and respectively to the people. I echo those words of the gentleman on the second floor. I would also submit that not one member of our House or Senate can tell us what hoops our state will be forced to jump through if we codify a state insurance exchange, especially since its rules are still being written. I will not be a party to passing it so we can find out what's in it. Also, as great as the bill sounds, I've heard from several hardworking people that are trying to make ends meet, and they were told this year when they did their taxes that since they couldn't afford health insurance, if they do not buy health insurance this year, they will be assessed a $1,300 penalty next year when they pay their taxes. I believe if we go back to the Health Freedom Act, it says, it is hereby declared that the public policy of the state of Idaho, consistent with our constitutionally recognized and inalienable rights of liberty, is that every person within the state of Idaho is and shall be free to choose or decline to choose any mode of securing health care services without penalty or threat of penalty. Mr. Speaker, may I read a short quote from James Madison?
Could gentleman restate your request?
Mr. Speaker, may I read a short quote from James Madison?
Without objection, the gentleman may read a short quote from
Thank you,
James
Mr.
Madison.
Speaker, and good body. In the Virginia Resolution of 1798, James Madison said, "Encroachments springing from a government whose organization cannot be maintained without the cooperation of the states furnish the strongest excitements upon the state legislatures to watchfulness and impose upon them the strongest obligation to preserve unimpaired the line of partition." And I realize those guys wrote differently than we do, and their vocabularies were incredible. It simply stated, he said that without the cooperation of the states and the state legislatures, us, the federal government would not be able to compromise the power of the states. We would have to be willing to give them up. In the mid-1800s, this country took a serious wrong turn. Prior to this time, a study of law in this country meant the study of the understanding of God's law. When the founders spoke of the laws of nature and of nature's God, they were referring to the absolute authority of biblical law. Now, a study of law consists of studying past decisions in past cases, or what is commonly referred to as case law. Without an absolute foundation for law, we have now entered into an age of legal positivism, which simply stated is the claim that the state is the ultimate authority for creating, interpreting, and enforcing law. All legal truth is based on the decision of the state. One of the big reasons that America became great was that our laws were uniform, predictable, and applied equally to all, from the greatest to the least of us. Once the doors open for law to change with the whims of society, catastrophe is the inevitable outcome. Two former Supreme Court justices illustrate this ideological divide. Mr. Speaker, if I may quote a couple of Supreme Court justices.
Without objection, the gentleman may read.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. James Wilson was a signer of the Constitution and a Supreme Court justice. He stated, "Human law must rest its authority ultimately upon the authority of that law which is divine. Far from being rivals or enemies, religion and law are twin sisters, friends and mutual assistance." To get another perspective, Oliver Wendell Holmes was also a Supreme Court justice. He said this, "Law is simply an embodiment of the ends and purposes of a society at any given point in its history. Beliefs that have triumphed and nothing more." A Supreme Court justice with this worldview can do more to take away our freedom and liberty than a large army. Now our constitutional rights rest largely in the hands of a 5-4 Supreme Court. We saw this in the now infamous Supreme Court decision on the Affordable Care Act. Mr. Speaker, may I quote from the Supreme Court decision on the Affordable Care Act?
Without objection, the gentleman may quote.
We've heard a lot about the majority opinions. Let's take a quick look at the minority opinions, the 4. Whether federal spending legislation crosses the line from enticement to a coercion is difficult sometimes to determine, and courts should not conclude that legislation is unconstitutional on this ground unless the coercive nature of an offer is unmistakably clear. In this case, however, there can be no doubt. They went on to say, the values that should have determined our course today are caution, minimalism, and the understanding that the federal government is one of limited powers. But the court's ruling today undermines those values at every turn. Another quote, imposing a tax through judicial legislation inverts the constitutional scheme and places the power to tax in the branch of government least accountable to its citizenry. And then a quote from the majority opinion. But the court does not express an opinion on the wisdom of the Affordable Care Act. Under the Constitution, that judgment is reserved to the people. District 3 has spoken to me, and their feelings are quite clear on this. Last night, I had dinner with a group, and a couple of lobbyists were there. And as we were eating, one of the guys mentioned that essentially what's happening is our government is going to monetize our debt, what that means is they're going to continue to print money until our money is worthless, hyperinflation. Now, another member of that table suggested that that was not a very great dinner topic, and so we left it. But at that time, my interest was piqued, and I'll get back to that. But one thing that cannot be overstated in this debate is the fact that our federal government has no money. We all talk about we're going to get federal money. There is none. There is no such thing. Kootenai County, at our Lincoln Days dinner last week, and both of Idaho's...
Gentlemen, I want to nudge you back on the topic, okay?
Okay. Well,
Gently.
actually, it is on topic.
Gently and with respect.
Okay. But
please proceed.
Okay. Anyway, our two senators spoke, and they painted a very dire fiscal picture. A wise man once told me that if you find yourself digging a hole and burying yourself, the first thing you want to do is stop digging. The simple truth is that America cannot afford the things we are doing now, let alone start a massive new entitlement program. Currently, entitlements use up all the revenue the federal government takes in, and we borrow the money for all the so-called discretionary expenditures like defense and pretty much everything else that would be considered a legitimate role of government. Our senators made it very clear that this current course is not sustainable. Last week, our federal debt surpassed $16.5 trillion. I've heard a number of different illustrations in an attempt to create the picture of just how large this number is, and this is the one that works for me. If you take a stack of $1,000 bills, $1,000 bills, it makes a stack 4 inches high. That's $1 million. That's not very big. How tall would that stack be to make $1 trillion? When I heard this first, I checked the math because it startled me. 63.3 miles. $16.5 trillion creates a stack of $1,000 bills over 1,044 miles high. The federal government has no money. We're talking about this like they do, and they're going to come in and save us with money. There is none. There's a verse in the Bible that addresses this. It's Proverbs 22:7. The second half of this verse states, the borrower is a slave to the lender. Our federal government is borrowing us all into slavery. I ran for this office because I do not believe that my children and grandchildren will experience the same liberty, freedom, and opportunities that I have been so blessed to experience living the American dream. Our founders secured the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. Please stand with me in doing everything that is possible in our state legislature to preserve the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. Please vote no to House Bill 248. Thank you.